All right, what I'm going to do here is start talking about my LA rap collection. We're not just going to stick with LA, let's just call it Southern California. I know I said in one of my past videos that the Bay Area hip hop was my favorite style, and I guess it technically is. The problem with the Bay Area, I find, outside of the classic albums, most of them are just light on quality. They got a good style of music, but just a couple highlighted tracks and a bunch of throwaways. That's just kind of my general opinion. Like, I love their beat style. I love their rapping style. A lot of different, unique voices from Northern California. But again, just the albums are not really stacking up to LA, I think. But we're going to start with a couple releases from San Diego. Which, by the way, not that I'm the most well-traveled person out there, but I've been on to, the majority of the states, at least driving through them. And San Diego, that might be the nicest city in the U.S. if you ask me. But anyways, this is What You Gonna Do by J.O. Felony. This came out in 1998 on, surprisingly in hindsight, Def Jam. This was his second full-length album. And you have Method Man, DMX, 8Ball and MJG, Redman, Mac 10, Ice Cube, E40. So a lot of the big names of the West Coast. And J.O. Felony was a very talented rapper. He should have gone on to do a lot bigger and better things. I think this album did okay, but this will probably be his most well-known. He put an album called Crip Hop several years after this. That was good. And he might still be around these days, but I'm out of touch. But a solid release. I don't know for a fact that he's from San Diego, but I'm pretty sure he is. This is a forgotten album called Street Fractions by Baby S. You have J.O. Felony himself on there. King T is on a couple songs. Again, Ruthless Records, Eazy-E's label, 2002. And this was a good album. There's no songs I thought really made it to a mixtape, but you can put it on and let it ride. It's pretty good. I Wish by Skee-Lo. This came out on Sunshine Records, Scotty Brothers Records. Actually, it doesn't say, but this must have been like 1995. And everyone remembers the song I Wish. And I thought that was kind of a goofy song at the time, but it's kind of catchy for what it is in hindsight. But my favorite song on here is Crenshaw. There's actually some bangers on here. There really is. I was kind of surprised, and I think he's from South Central. And I don't know what happened to him after this, but had a big hit, and that was it. So now we're gonna go to 1998, Ice Cube, War and Peace, Disc 1, The War Album. So Ice Cube put out Lethal Injection in the early 90s, and then he did some work with West Side Connection and had quite a few years without putting out a solo album. So he put out this one, the War Disc, on Priority, again in 1998, and then a year or so later he put out the Peace album, which wasn't great to me. They had that one song, Until We Rich, with Crazy Bone. That's a good one, but otherwise forgettable. But this one here, I actually really like. My favorite songs on here are definitely the first two, Ask About Me, Push and Wait, and Cash Over Ass. Kind of a cool album cover. And again, at the time, I was a big Ice Cube fan. And we'll get into more of his albums as we go. But that was the last solo album that I actually bought. And actually, before I move on, he was working with a rapper called Mr. Short Chop at the time. And he's all over this album. And 3 years later, in 2001, Mr. Short Chop would finally put out his debut full-length album, The Chop Shop. This came out on TVT Records, and he has a very unique style, a unique rapping voice. But this album just wasn't really up to snuff for me. The songs just weren't there. But you got Ice Cube all over this, Corrupt, Cocaine. And when you look at that, they even got Shaquille O'Neal on here. Cypress Hill, Black Sunday. I've never been a big Cypress Hill guy, but as I get older, they're okay. And this is probably their most well-known album from 1993 on Rough House Columbia. All the beats done by DJ Muggs, who has a pretty good production style actually, even if it's somewhat samey. But a lot of well-known songs on here. I Want to Get High, I Ain't Going Out Like That, Insane in the Brain, Cock the Hammer. I remember that was on the Last Action Hero soundtrack. That's probably the first time I heard these guys. That was all hard rock and metal with a rap song in the middle of it. Legalize It, and Hits from the Bong, A to the K. I'd say that's like most of their well-known songs right here. Let's go to a couple big names here. Tupac and the Outlaws, Still I Rise. This was 1999, Interscope Records. And I didn't really give this a chance at first. I liked a couple of the big Tupac albums, but my best friend from high school, he wasn't even the biggest rap guy, but he knew everything about Tupac. And he said this is one of the best Tupac releases. I don't put it on that much, but you know, it might be. The Outlaws, I always wanted to like them, and I do. They all have their moments, but none of them really just had that quality that was going to make any of them a solo success. And even though they did put out a bunch of great albums on the underground, like none of them were classic. But I'll get to those on another day. My favorite song on here has got to be Teardrops and Closed Caskets with Nate Dogg. So speaking of Nate Dogg, he would eventually put out an official solo album. And actually, I forget the story behind these. This is called G-Funk Classics Volume 1 and 2. It's a double album. One called Ghetto Preacher and one called The Prodigal Son. And I just don't know if they were ever released on their own. I think they were albums that were prepared that just didn't get released till 1998. And this was on an independent label. It wasn't put out on Death Row or anything. But you got a million big names on here. Daz, Corrupt, Snoop. What are my favorite ones on here? You got Me and My Homies with Tupac. These Days with Daz, that's one of the best ones. Almost in Love, I like. Friends with Warren G and Snoop. And Nobody Does It Better with Warren G. Those are probably the two standouts. Nobody Does It Better and These Days. Above the Law, Legends. So this came out in 1998 on Tommy Boy. Above the Law are definitely West Coast legends. Where are they from? Compton? South Central? The LA area. But I was gonna say, is that song Black Superman on here? That was a good one, but no, that's not on here. I've listened to this album in a long time. But Cole 187 he does all the beats. Great producer. And I might have a couple other Above the Law albums around here somewhere. Finally, Corrupt, Against the Grain. This is kind of a forgotten album, if you ask me. So if you didn't know, all the drama that went down with Death Row after Tupac died and Snoop left the label, and pretty much everyone left the label in the late 90s except Daz Dillinger. And Kurupt was amongst those that left. He never really had anything bad to say about Death Row, but he did one off. And then once even Daz left, Kurupt came back to Death Row. Suge gave him a position, A&R or something. And after years and years of Suge promising to put out Crooked Eye and Eastwood, all these new rappers that he signed, I think he even had Booyah Tribe for a bit, nothing materialized with fresh new music, to my knowledge, except for this one here. It's just not that good. I love Kurupt. It's one of my all-time favorite rappers. The only song on here that I go back to is Calico featuring the Dayton Family from Flint, Michigan. I got a couple of their albums. We'll look at that some other day. What else is on here? I guess Roscoe and M.O.P., Eastwood, a couple names I don't really recognize. But that Calico song, you should check that one out. So that's it. My first 10 Southern California rap albums. Thanks for watching.